We are now live. Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries, and I'm your host, your brother, and your friend Rashid. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on another edition of the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries. And as we wait for my co-host to join us, I got to give a shout out to everybody who supports the channel, who supports the platforms. I got to give a shout out first and foremost to God for making all things possible. Shout out to Brooke Chin in the building. What it's like. Shout out to M Sparks 187. What's up, everybody? Listen, I'm glad you're joining us. Carl, hit me up. He'll be here. He hit me up. He'll be here. But until he gets here, we're going to address a few things. Okay. Now, it's something very important that we do need to address. All right. So before the show, I want to establish something that most people don't establish. They talk about it and they let it go. But I want to establish facts as we go so that everything that we are talking about can be proven or disproven. Okay. That lays the base work, base for everything. And it means that your arguments are legitimate, right? And this is where we want to be at, okay? No conjecture at the point, no assumptions at the point, just reality. So before the show started, shout out to Red Axis. Peace. Oh, and by the way, before we go further, you guys got to join me tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. If at all possible, if Brian Belletic can make it, he'll be on the platform. He'll jump on the platform at 7. If he can't jump on it, then we're going to rock and roll. But he told me he'll try to jump on the platform tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Okay, so I just want you guys to know that also, and I'm going to repeat that a couple times through the show. We got Carl in the building already, so I want to repeat that a couple times. So please join us tomorrow at 7. My guy, my co-host, my friend Carl Zar is in the building. How's it going today, Carl?
Hi, Rishi. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing pretty good, and I see your son in the background. I got to give him a salute.
I let him stay. If he promised, don't make any noises. So my wife's still sleeping, so I'm like double duty babysitting.
I got you, Carl. I got mine. My son, well, my daughter is right here. And she's in and out of the door. So if you hear the door creaking or whatever, she's in and out. Because my wife works overnight. She's a nurse, so she works overnight. So my daughter is in and out. So anyway, gotcha. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Shout out to Blue Pill Diary. Shout out to Flying Crocodiles 4630. Now, Carl, before we go further, I want to establish something. As I was telling the people, but I want to establish some facts so that we can see whether America's actions that she's carrying out are legal or illegal. So first, before the show started, I just put in these words right here. Is it illegal under international law to attack or threaten to attack a nation? And according to the AI overview, it says yes, it is generally illegal under international law to attack or threaten to attack a nation that poses no threat. And this is under the United Nations Charter, Article 2.4. It prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Unauthorized attack is considered a crime of aggression. Okay, so we have that point. And Article 2.4 says this: under the UN Charter, it prohibits UN member states, which the United States and Israel are members of the United Nations and the UN Charter, from using or threatening force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. It is a cornerstone of international law that bans war or coercion, requiring disputes to be settled peacefully, with exceptions only for self-defense or Security Council authorization. So now that we have an understanding of that, Carl, Doesn't this show us the illegality of all of the moves that the United States and Israel has made and are making and are professing to be getting ready to make against Iran and other nations?
Rashid, when has the United States or Israel ever followed the international law? This is, by the way, even according to the U.S. own constitution, only Congress has authorization for war. When was the last time the Congress issued a declaration of war? As, as far as I remember, I do not remember any time the U.S. Congress has, well, as long as I've been alive, I don't remember any time the U.S. Congress has issued a declaration of war. But U.S. was in Vietnam, U.S. was in Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Iran. Again, I mean, this is illegal under the U.S. Constitution. But who cares about Constitution, right? We have the Epstein regime to protect here. That's the most important thing. And let's remember, this is essentially a Pearl Harbor style attack. United States was engaged in negotiation with Iran over Iran's nuclear armament. And now, according to the various diplomatic leaks, both from the foreign ministry of Oman and foreign diplomats involved, they all confirmed that Iran basically accepted all the terms issued by the Trump administration. They even proposed that Iran will give up its nuclear material, to allow U.S. to come in and take all the nuclear material away from Iran to guarantee that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon program. Right after that agreement, U.S. bombed Iran, took out its senior leader. I mean, this is a Pearl Harbor style sneak attack during negotiations. This is exactly what Japanese did on December 7th, 1941. And for Iran, this is 9/11 and Pearl Harbor all rolled into one. When 9/11 happened, the United States went insane, went on a rampage all throughout West Asia. And what they're doing to capital Iran, Tehran right now, is 10 times worse than 9/11. They're bombing schools, killing hundreds of school children, schoolgirls. There's nothing under international law that can justify it. And Trump fully knows it, but they don't care because there must be some very damning evidence against him in the Epstein file yet to be released. Because you have to remember, Israel has been pressuring United States to go into war against Iran forever. Remember like when General Wesley Clark, I think it was back in 1997, he said he revealed in an interview that even back in the 1990s, that there was a plan in the Pentagon to go after 7 countries. And Iran was the last country that was left standing on this list. And for the past 7 U.S. presidents, they have resisted the Israeli pressure to go to war against Iran because they knew it would be a complete disaster. Because Iran, they do control over the Strait of Hormuz, the lifeline of the world's energy supply. And so they all knew what the risk is involved, and they all held off. It took Donald Trump to actually do it. So I think Israelis, they must have some very damning evidence against him. And for Netanyahu and Israel, this is also their once in a lifetime chance. They figure they're probably not going to get another president that's so compromised as this one. And for them, for Israel, Netanyahu was on record saying, I don't care what happened, regime change or the destabilization, balkanization, it's all good. It's all good. That was Israel's goal. Israel's goal is destroy Iran as a potent, coherent political entity in West Asia that could present an obstacle to their greater Israel project. That has been Israel's plan forever. But they know they cannot do it alone. They know they lack the capability to do it, so they have to drag Uncle Sam into it. And now we're doing it. And now I think Trump did it is because the whole Venezuela thing got to his head, and his advisor probably told him this just will be an easy job. We'll go in quick and out. We'll just take out our senior leadership in a decapitation strike, and the rest of the Iranian government will fall over. Well, guess what? They didn't. And this is another thing what the United States they don't understand. The Iranian, they have their culture, their religion, has this concept of martyrdom. And that's something Americans don't understand. They don't understand about sacrifice. They don't understand the concept of sacrifice for the greater goods. And for the Iranian leader Khamenei, he's like 86 years old. He did not hide in a bunker. You know, he could have hide in a bunker. He didn't. He chose to spend time in his home with his family. And that's where they killed him, you know, along with his granddaughter, his daughter, his son-in-law, you know, all his family. But now that made him a martyr. And guess what? He was the one, the supreme leader Khamenei was the one who issued a fatwa against Iran acquiring nuclear weapon. And United States just took him out. And on top of that, they took out all the negotiators that was involved in the negotiation with United States. So, U.S. has no desire for peace. U.S. and Israel, they have no sincere desire for peace settlement. Their goal has always been dismemberment of Iran. And that's what they're doing right now, destabilization and dismemberment of Iran. So Iran, they're fighting for survival. This is an existential fight for them. This is why this is not a fight that U.S. can win, because for United States, this is really not an existential fight. We do not need to be involved in Iran at all. Iran do not pose an existential threat to the United States. This is a war that Trump chose to go after, and now we're seeing the consequences. Trump is already desperate. They have just lifted sanction. They had just lifted sanction on Iranian oil. First they lifted sanction on Russian oil because they realized, oh crap, we have to increase the supply of oil worldwide. But you know what? If you think about it, they're actually not increasing the supply to the global oil market, because Russian oil has always been available to go to, before it was China and India, and then India was pressured by United States to stop purchasing. So Iranian oil and Russian oil, they were going to China. And now United States have to put a sanction waiver, is because US know all its allies are getting screwed. You have countries like South Korea and Japan who are 90% reliant on oil coming from the Strait of Hormuz. And now this is why US have to waiver the sanctions. So they will at least allow Japan, Philippines, South Korea, etc. to be able to purchase Iranian oil and Russian oil, because otherwise they would have been totally screwed. And Australia as well. Australia, they depend on 32% of Australians' jet fuel come from China. And after the war started, China says, you know what? We need all the gasoline and diesel for ourselves. We're going to stop exporting. Because China was one of the largest exporter of petroleum product, even though China was a large importer, because China has a huge refining capacity. They are one of the largest exporter of diesel, gas, and jet fuel in the region. And they supply Australia with 32% of its jet fuel. Well, guess what? That 32% is just gone like that. Because China's like, sorry, we have to keep it for ourselves. We can't keep exporting. and on top of that, China also put a ban on export of fertilizers, nitrogen, potassium, which is very important fertilizer. That's what many people don't realize. Fertilizers also synthesized from oil and gas. And China says, okay, we have to serve our own people first. We're no longer going to export those fertilizers. So all these other countries are screwed. Right now it's planting season. It's spring. It's planting season. This is when the farmers start to plant for the whole the new year, and they're going to need a lot of fertilizer. And and Qatar gas just been completely cut off. And not only agriculture is impacted, helium. Taiwan, Taiwan. I just saw a tweet. Somebody says, "Oh, TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor, is a Strait of Hormuz for AI." I'm like, no. The Strait of Hormuz is a Strait of Hormuz for AI. Because Taiwan semiconductors, they depend on 70% of their helium supply coming out of the Persian Gulf, mostly from Qatar, and that has been completely cut off. And you need helium to make semiconductor chips. Well, guess what? Forget about that. And thanks to United States, the Donald Trump's dumb decision, you can forget about. Iran is going to put the final nail in the coffin to the whole AI bubble right now. I was joking, because the new Doom movie was coming out. For people who read the Doom series, the whole series, the whole book of Doom was on the premises before the story of Doom took place. There's something called the Butlerian Jihad, where the people revolted against the thinking machines. Right, and they wipe out all the thinking machine, all the AI and stuff. So I made a tweet. No, the Butlerian Jihad is now, and Iran just started it. They started it against the whole AI thinking machines by wiping out the helium supply. You're not gonna get your semiconductor chips, and forget about expansion of your AI data centers. You're not getting the AI. First of all, AI is also very energy intensive. So first, you're not getting the chips. And then you're not getting the energy to run your data centers, because AI is very energy intensive. So actually, Amazon, a lot of those big companies actually put their AI center in the Gulf region, in United Arab Emirates, in places like that, because they thought, oh, we're being smart. We're going to put our AI center closer to the energy supply. Well, all those AI centers are under attack by Iranian missiles and drones right now. So for the longest time, the United States economy would have been in recession if you'd taken out all these humongous investment into AI industry. Well, guess what? The AI industry, you can kiss the AI industry goodbye right now, because they're not going to get the energy to run it. All their data center in Middle East is getting decimated. They're not getting any more helium supply to make more chips, and this is going to be a problem for everyone. Fertilizers, fuel. You don't have fuel. You see. This is why. While the war was going on, you see neocon think tanks like Hudson Institute was putting out they're giving blowjob to Trump in pieces like, oh, this is Trump playing 5D chess. This is really a 5D chess move against China. Trump is grabbing all the energy supply in the world, from Venezuela to Iran. And so by the time Trump goes to meet Xi Jinping in Beijing, he will have a strong hand. He will have China by the balls by controlling all China's vital energy supply. Well, guess what? Trump is now thinking about postponing or cancel his trip to China, because he knows he will show up with a very, very weak hand. China is actually best positioned to weather the storm right now, because China has been stockpiling their strategic oil reserve for the last 4 years. They've been taking advantage of the historically low oil prices by purchasing a lot of oil from Russia, from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, from Africa. So China has about 1.2 to 1.5 billion barrels of oil sitting in their strategic oil reserve. And they have another 144 million barrels of Iranian oil heading their way. By the way, Iran right now is exporting more oil to China than they have ever done before the war, and they're doing it at a higher oil price too. So this war has been, in terms of economy, is the whole waiver of U.S. sanction, and now Iran is exporting more oil. Iran and Russia is going to benefit from the high oil prices, and that will allow Iran to make more missiles. Unlike China's relationship with the United States, where China announced they put a ban on rare earth minerals to U.S. military industrial complex, which makes it very hard for U.S. to be able to replace its arsenal of Patriot missiles and all the other missile interceptors. Iran does not have that problem. China has been supplying Iran with chemical precursors that's needed to make missiles. I mean that China has sent those shipments both before the 12 Days Wars and after 12 Days War. So Iran got enough material from China to make more missiles and to keep their missile barrage coming, their missile and drone strike coming. And the supply line to Iran from China and Russia, they don't need to go through the shipping or the world shipping lanes. They can go either over land, over the railroad that China helped build, or they can go over Caspian Seas from Russia. Both cases are outside of the reach of the U.S. Navy. And what the U.S. Navy is doing? Well, the USS Ford is having some medical episode, or I'm sorry, a fire in the laundry room, right? I mean, first they said they had a shit overflowing problem on the ship, and then the fire in the laundry room that the 600 sailors lost their beds. I mean, at this point, it's less embarrassing for them just to say, okay, Iranian missile hit us. If they just say Iranian missile hit us, it'll be less embarrassing than whatever story they're putting out right now. Oh, fire in the laundry room. We have to send the USS Ford back to ports for repair. And the other aircraft carrier in the group, in the region, the USS Lincoln, it put 1,000 kilometers between itself and Iran and the coastline of Iran. You went behind the whole country of Oman to hide behind the mountains from Iranian missile and drones. And this is this is apparently the largest battle the U.S. Navy has engaged in after World War II. We know that because back in the Red Sea operation a year ago, they said, "Oh, this is the most intensive naval engagement we have been involved in since World War II." Well, this is much bigger than the so-called Operation Prosperity Guardian, which they failed to stop the Houthis. What this war has shown is really show that U.S. is a paper tiger. It cannot stop the attack on the U.S. bases. It cannot protect its so-called allies in the region. Then what is the use to have U.S. presence in the region? The whole premise of U.S. empire in West Asia is so they extend their security umbrella to cover their ally, to cover UAE, to cover Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Israel, but all of them are under attack, and there's nothing U.S. can do about it. We haven't seen the, U.S. boasts it has the world's most advanced anti-missile system. Well, we see if you have enough missiles, you can overwhelm whatever anti-missile system they put up with, because those anti-missile systems are expensive. Each missile interceptors cost like upwards of more than $1 million. In terms of that system, the THAAD interceptor costs tens of millions of dollars, and the Iranian drones only cost like $30,000, $50,000 US. They can make more. U.S. is not going to win this war of attrition, while its whole physical infrastructure for its empire has been severely degraded. Remember Pete Hegseth was saying in a press conference, he was lashing out. He was totally have a crash out. He said, "Don't you understand how hard it is? What it is like for our pilots to fly 36 hours straight?" And you were like, why are the U.S. pilots flying 36 hours straight? Well, that's because they can't use any of their bases in the region anymore. They have been destroyed, so they have to do it from much further away. This is why U.S. pilots have to stay awake for 36 hours. They're on drugs. They're giving. There's no way, man. They're flying 36 hours straight. They're on drugs, man. And this is the state of the U.S. empire, unfortunately, and Trump has done his best job to show that empire has no clue. He really showed that the U.S. empire is actually naked, exposed, and the all the rationale for the U.S. empire system is getting blown to pieces by Iranian drones and missiles right now. And remember, Pete Hegseth said they'll gain air superiority over Iran in the coming days. Well, that was like a week ago, and two F-35 had just fallen out of the sky since. And this is a big deal because if they can't use their F-35, that means that you have to use their older legacy of airplanes, which means they cannot easily cross into Iranian airspace. If you've seen all the attacks on Iran, they're mostly concentrated on this corridor on the western side of Iran. So what that means is they're flying their planes right up to the border of Iran, and they're firing off all the standoff munitions like cruise missiles into Iran because, again, they do not have air superiority. They're afraid of Iranian air defense, and those cruise missiles numbers are limited. This is what's a problem they had known since the 12 Days War. The first is the missile interceptors that has been depleted, and now they've been depleting their standoff munitions as well. Their hope was they will gain air superiority, so they will be able to fly B-52 over Tehran and drop dumb bombs like those or maybe even laser guided bombs, because those are cheaper and the US have plenty. But so far, US has shown it has no air superiority. Your F-35 just went down. I think they have some medical emergency in the parlance of Pentagon. And what this really has shown is if US cannot take on Iran, there's no hope. There's no hope whatsoever for U.S. war against China. I mean, forget about it. Don't even think about it. This was a proven ground to show how much a paper tiger the U.S. military really is. That they used to boast, how U.S. military has tons of combat experience, whereas the Chinese, they have none because they haven't fought a war for a long time. They haven't fought a war for 40 years. Well, guess what? It turns out the U.S. combat experiences has been composed of striking against gold herds and Afghan weddings, and this is the first time. They have never fought an enemy with access to satellite intelligence before, and this time is different. This time is different because Iran is getting help. Iran has very good targeting system right now compared to what they have done in the 12 Days War. This time they know where to hit, what to hit, and both their own indigenous capability has improved. Iran obviously have some very good human intelligence on the ground, and they're getting satellite targeting help from Russia and China, and this is why the U.S. satellite company had now put a temporary pause on the satellite images coming out of West Asia for like 92 hours. But that's not their official reason. Is like, oh yeah, we don't want to aid the enemy. Look, Iranians, they don't need you. They have access to Chinese satellites. So what they're really doing is they don't want you. They don't want you to know how much U.S. infrastructure has been damaged, but thanks to Chinese satellite companies like Mizar Vision, we can see now it's all freely available on the web. We can see the extensive damage the Iranian missile and drones have wreaked on the U.S. bases, and NATO just announced they're taking out their mission staff out of Iraq. First of all, why is NATO still in Iraq? But anyway, they're pulling out. French also said the same thing after one of the French officers died in Iraq. These guys, all these NATO countries, that have been deeply embedded in the region. Despite what Donald Trump's complaining about, NATO is a paper tiger. Well, it's true. It's true, but he said NATO will be a paper tiger without United States. Well, then why are you complaining? U.S. is the largest military in the NATO. If United States can't do anything to open the Strait of Hormuz, what's a couple more French and German ship is going to help? Nothing. And the Europeans knows it too. They don't want to go down with the ship right now. And and this is why but the problem is we're in a very dangerous phase of the war, because Donald Trump tried to find an off-ramp, but there's no off-ramp. It's not up to him to end the war right now. It's the Iranians. Go back to the book Doom. There's a famous quote from Doom: whoever can destroy a thing controls it. It's Iranians that control the flow of the oil right now. United States went in thinking they can control the flow of oil and dictate who gets the oil, who doesn't. Well, guess what? Iranians are setting the terms right now, and they're the one says, okay, Chinese ship, okay, and oil that's paid in Chinese yuan, okay. Iran is decolonizing West Asia and de-dollarizing at the same time. I mean, Iran single-handedly is dismantling the U.S. imperial system right now in West Asia. And it's beautiful. I love it.
And one thing, two fun facts. The Beidou system is far more advanced and has far more satellites in its constellation and it's far more accurate than GPS. Most people don't know that the Chinese satellite system is more advanced, more modern, and it's larger than, and more people have switched to the Beidou. And in the strategic documents that were signed between Iran and China, Iran gets access to the Beidou system, so they don't need GPS or the European satellite system or whatever. So they have that. Another fun fact before we go further, I saw Flying Crocodile says this. I'm a student of history, so when I see things, I have to point it out. Flying Crocodile says something about the great Satan. Let me pull it up. Here it is, right here. Flying Crocodile says America is living up to the Iranian expectation as the great devil by doing extremely evil and illegal acts. As a matter of fact, do you know where that term came from? Since I'm a student of history and I study West Asia and Persia, actually this took place in France. When the Ayatollah Khomeini was in France in exile, he met with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad out of the United States. And that is when he went back to Iran, he started calling the United States the great Satan and Israel the small Satan. So I'm a history student, and most people don't even know that, but that is a fact right there. So let me go further. Carl, so someone wanted to ask you a question. I believe it was someone called Sheena or Sheila. I'm trying to Chanel 3202 wanted to ask you a question. Let me scroll down to it before we go further, because she said please, and I wanted to respect her wishes if we can. So she said, please ask Carl, is it beneficial to Iran to get payment in rial instead of yuan? I don't think so, because the rial is not convertible like that. But what is your take on that, Carl?
Yeah, actually, Iran, there's a couple benefits of getting paid in yuan. Is they can then use that yuan to go buy more stuff from China, and China is a world manufacturing superpower right now. They can make everything. So just the power of yuan, I think, will go a lot further than real at this point, at this particular juncture. Yeah,
so
U.S.
Carl,
is you.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was responding to that. U.S. is sending more ships. This is the worrying part. That the part I worry about, because U.S. is sending couple ships with 5,000 U.S. Marines from their bases in Okinawa to the theater in West Asia right now. And as we speak, those ships are transiting through the Strait of Malacca from Singapore, and it's going to take them 2 weeks to arrive in position. That means they at least expect minimum the war will last more than 2 weeks, before the Marine will even arrive. And this is really bad for the world economy, of course, to have to have the oil blockage to go on even longer. So right now, their estimate, even if the Strait of Hormuz were open today, it would take 6 months to restore all the oil infrastructure to get the oil flow again at the same rate as it was before the war started. So either way, we're looking at a very dire situation for the world economy right now. And this, the oil price have finally skyrocketed. And this is because nobody expect a quick resolution anytime soon. And by the way, that 5,000 Marines is not going to make any dent. I mean, this is ridiculous. Trump is expecting to send them to take over this island in the Persian Gulf from Iran that hosts Iran's oil facilities. This Iran's coast is very jagged, with many high cliffs. For the people who are students of history, people must remember this. There was this thing called the Campaign of Gallipoli in World War One, when the British Empire sent mostly Australians and New Zealand soldiers try to take Gallipoli from the Ottoman Empire in order to open the Strait of Bosphorus so they can supply Russia through Black Sea. Well, the Gallipoli was a complete disaster because they're trying to do a beach landing, and they're surrounded by the high ground, so the Ottomans can just pick them off from their higher position. And this is exactly type of geography the U.S. Marine is getting into. They're gonna be Iranians will shoot them like shooting fish in a barrel. And this is all because Trump's ego cannot allow him at this point to do a full climb down and just declare victory and go home. I think he very much would like to declare victory and go home, but right now, if he does, it's basically a complete admission of defeat on all fronts, because the U.S. empire is going to be gone from Midwest Asia and possibly forever. This is why he is hanging on, and that's a dangerous part. Is he will drag this war for a long time, and this is what happened in the Vietnam War. By the way, all the Pentagon planners knew full well going into the Vietnam that this is a war of attrition that they cannot win, because if Vietnam was getting fully supplied by China and Soviet Union, but they still dragged the war out for years because there's no political will to stop it, because they thought, we cannot afford to look weak, so we got to just keep going to send more working class young men into the meat grinder. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to send more working class American kids go to die for Israel. This is very unfortunate.
Those who don't learn from history usually repeats it, right? And what we're seeing, the empires of yesteryear and how they collapsed, and we're seeing that in real time in our lifetime. Carl, but someone wanted to ask you something, and I think it slipped my. I want to apologize to everybody because this thing is going so fast, and I'm trying to pull questions out of there, but it is jumping. So, but Carl, are you calling Pete Hegseth a liar? He says that the United States is winning and everything is going good, and you're telling me that he is lying and that America is strong and proud and they don't need any help?
Well, the Pete Hegseth has said we have been winning for the last 3 weeks. Every day he comes out is win win win. I mean, there's too much winning. I can't take it anymore. Trump said during his campaign trial, no, we will win so much. You'll be sick and tired of winning. I am sick and tired of the Pete Hegseth win right now. I mean, we can stop winning anytime. But Pete Hegseth, let's remember. Pete Hegseth, what was his job before he became Secretary of War? Dude is a live show host for Fox News. That's his job qualification. And Trump, he is another reality TV show host. This is what happened. Our country, United States, is literally run by bad TV personality right now. All they know how to do is to act tough in front of the camera, to huff and puff. That's what they have been conditioned to do, but they don't know anything about how to run a country, much less an empire. And it shows. And right now we are living. This is why I used to joke that Trump is my president because he is my president for the accelerationism of American decline. Well, I mean, that's still true. He has really set the path for the accelerated decline of the U.S. empire right now. And everybody can see how ridiculous. By the way, did you just see the other press conference that Trump held with the Japanese Prime Minister? So Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi came for a visit, and a Japanese reporter asked a question. Say, why did you not inform your allies like us, Japan, about your attack on Iran? And Trump says, well, because I want to preserve the element of surprise. You Japanese know everything about surprise. You did not tell me about Pearl Harbor. This is kind of the leadership we have in this country right now. I mean, it's comical. People always say, "Oh, Carl, you laugh too much on the show. It's very serious." Look, man, in the world like this is the best way to cope. This is you have to laugh at it, otherwise you go crazy. This is tragic comedy we're living through, and this is we have a bunch of buffoons for the U.S. leadership. I mean, Iran is absolutely correct. They're fighting the Epstein regime. They're fighting Epstein regime on behalf of the rest of the world.
And I want you to listen to this, because after I play this clip, it's a short clip. I was gonna pull it up. I have it in my on my computer, but I don't want it to buffer a little bit, so I'm gonna play it off my phone. And I want you to listen to the arrogance and the sheer stupidity that's coming out of I'm gonna say it like he said, Pig Hegseth, P-I-G Hegseth. I want you to listen to the arrogance of this. This shows you how detached from reality that the leadership is in the Western world, how they can always project onto others what they're doing. So I want to play this real quick. And matter of fact, let me take my headphones out of the computer and Carl, if you can hear it, just let me know.
All right. To that point on capabilities, Iran is an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. That's why you had millions of Iranians protesting, because they felt like their condition quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be. And what was the Iranian state? There's a reason we call Iran the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, because they took the money they make and they invest it in tunnels, and they invested in missiles, and they invested in launchers and UAVs, and we are destroying and degrading that in historic proportions. But it doesn't mean they won't still have some and try to hold people at issue, which is why we're fighting every single day to continue to compel. And you mentioned embassies and consulates. Unlike previous administrations, we are doubling and tripling down on ensuring that our people, regardless of their Department of War, Department of State, whatever they do, are secure in those facilities. And the best defense is a good offense. And so we're not afraid to go after and kill anybody. And we have a lot of them attempting to target at our diplomatic facilities. Iran, we're not surprised that they would indiscriminately target, and we're still seeing that.
So Carl, I just let me put my headphones back in. So now he was bashing Iran for spending, and Iran, I think Iran's defense budget is under $10 billion. And here it is, the United States is 1 point some trillion, but one of the Pentagon former heads who dealt with the budget, I forget his name, he said that whatever the United States tells you that the defense budget is, multiplied by 3 to 5 times. So Mike Maloof, that's what his name is, Mike Maloof, and he does a lot of commentary on RT. So he says that. So now, as he talks about Iran spending money on defense, and I think Iran's budget is under $10 billion, we have an article that came out that says that Pentagon's budget is requesting $200 billion more dollars for the war against Iran. So hold on, just before you comment. So we're sending more weapons, more warplanes, more everything, more troops, and we need more money for a war that we're supposedly be winning easily. And we have destroyed 100% of the Iranian Navy, 100% of the Iranian Air Force. We've destroyed 90% of the IRGC, and we have control over the skies, yet we're spending more money. How? In what world does that make sense?
I mean, every day he's coming and say we destroy another 90% of Iranian capability. I mean, the thing is, if you actually look at the military budget, U.S. spend far more than what Iran spends on defense, and yet Iran is putting up a very good fight against United States. It turns out all this money that went into Pentagon, it wasn't all that money wasn't spent to win any actual war. Is went into to pat the pockets, all the fat cats of the Pentagon contractor, and kick back to all the Pentagon top brass. I mean, it's a system designed for grift, and it works very well. It works that's what it's designed for. It's not designed for winning wars, and we're seeing the result of that. And again, they're blaming Iran for actually bother to defend themselves. Of course, it's Iran's fault to put their country so close to all the U.S. bases, and then it's Iran's fault to dare to defend themselves against unprovoked U.S. attacks. We live in 1984, right? But war is peace, and they give a Nobel Peace Prize to this to Machado, who calls for military intervention in Venezuela. We are living a bizarre world of 1984 right now. War is peace, and these guys, just to justify themselves, they just repeat lies after lies. But the rest of the world, there's a decided opinion shift. This recent survey that comes out, that there's a 72% drop in the perception of the United States around the rest of the world. And even the U.S. ally countries, I'm talking about France, Germany, even UK. And when people were asked, whether China or United States is better for this world, and more people chose China. This is U.S. allies, and because you can't keep on doing this and hope people don't notice. I mean, you can fool some people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time. This is the longer the drag, they're going to try to shift the blame. Trump already started. He already blamed his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He said, Kushner told me this was going to be an easy job, right? And he may very well said that, but you are the dumbass who believed it, because we have such a low intelligence, low information leadership that it can be so easily manipulated into a world war. And So I have to tell my son not to make too much noise in the background. um, so we are living through a historical moment right now, and I think people don't realize the world is not the same after the U.S. Israeli attack on Iran. This whole Strait of Hormuz issue is not likely to be resolved anytime soon, and even when eventually it does open up, the worlds will look fundamentally different. First of all, people are going to start to think about energy self-reliance. This is something China has been pushing for. This is why China has been building out its electrification of the country. They electrified the railway, and they did a massive push for the EV transition. So they're less reliant on hydrocarbon for fuel. And for electricity, they're doing a massive rollout of solar, wind, and nuclear power. So China is now like 84% energy self-sufficient. I'm so happy I bought a Chinese EV last year, so now I'm not too worried about the oil price spike at the moment. And I'm also going to put solar panels on my roof, so I will be, so I will be somewhat insulated from this energy crisis. But this is gonna happen all across the world. People are gonna have to think about how to prepare for the worst scenario. One of the problem is this U.S. leadership was so arrogant. They went into the war with minimal planning. I mean, even if they let's say their goal is for the aggrandizement of the U.S. empire. Well, you can do it smartly, but thankfully they're being stupid, because the U.S. strategic oil reserve have been drawing down since the Joe Biden years, because they wanted to calm the inflation and win more votes. But Trump, he knew he was going to lose the war. He didn't even bother trying to fill up the strategic oil reserve like China had done for the past 4 years. And and here we are. There's very little plan about what would happen if Iran does close the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran said time after time they would do if United States attacked them. So now this is going to be a bad year, man, for the whole world economy. And Trump and Peach heads they have to continually spin up more lies to cover their own asses. But more and more people are seeing through that right
now. I remember what it was. Someone asked the question. All it takes is for a little time, and it'll come right back to me. Someone was asking about a currency swap agreement. And so when they asked me that, I went to something on Google and I put in Iran-China currency swap deal. And the AI overview says this. For the person who put it in, I can't remember who it was, but this is the answer to your question. Iran and China are implementing a 25-year, $400 billion strategic partnership that involves using local currencies, both the yuan and rial, for oil transactions to bypass U.S. sanctions and reduce dependence on the dollar. So that's your answer right there. You can just put those words in that I put in, and you can get your answer right there. So yes, but what we're watching, Carl, is desperation more than anything else. Because you have to understand that time's an empire. Time is no longer on the side of the Western world. And when I use an analogy often about a boxer that has been the champion so long, and when they see an up-and-coming, a more youthful opponent that is stronger, can take more punches, that is faster, that has better footwork, that can move quicker, that has more endurance, it frightens them. And so they try to put up every obstacle before that person has to finally meet them to take that position. And I believe this is what is going on. America did not just attack China outright. She went around trying to weaken China's resolve and partnerships with other nations. The same as what she did with Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union and how she gobbled up former Soviet nations. And then after she gobbled those up, she started lighting geopolitical and political fires in nations surrounding Russia, so as to have Russia preoccupied with that stuff and wasting manpower and money on trying to put out those fires. And I think she thought that I can go after China now because we've just inserted troops into Nigeria, where China gets a little oil from. We just deposed Venezuelan President Maduro, where China had investments in. And now, if we get Iran, which is the prize of all prizes, we now cement ourselves in West Asia, and we have China and Russia completely surrounded. We're in their underbelly. We can stop the North-South corridor. We can stop the Belt and Road Initiative. We can control China's rise, and then we can prevent Russia's reemergence as a superpower. All of that if we could just take out Iran. What do you say about that?
I sometimes I wonder, whether U.S. do have like a grand strategy, master plan, or this is just, U.S. stumbling all the way. But in either case, even if they had a grand master plan, the execution is horrible. Like what Alan Greenspan said about the Iraq War. Right? Alan Greenspan in his memoir, he said, we went into Iraq war to control the flow of oil. Well, they're still doing it. I mean, this is what they're still trying to do, but it shows it's not the United States controlling the oil anymore. I'm gonna quote that quote from Doom. The people who can destroy a thing controls it. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controls the oil flow to the world. Not the U.S. Navy, very expensively sustained military arms of the United States, and U.S. really show how weak it is by before every operation, even before this current operation, you have all these bots on social media posting U.S. military propaganda and saying ridiculous things like, now Iran's gonna find out why we don't have healthcare. Like, why would you even be prideful of that? Why would you even be proud of that? But on top of that, you don't have healthcare because all the money went into shitty military hardware, which doesn't even work. That's why you don't have healthcare. The amount of money the U.S. has spent so far, this was from 2 days ago, by the way. The amount of money U.S. spent so far is $21 billion with a B. With that amount of money, China built 1,000 kilometers of high-speed railway. Just imagine what all this money could do if it was actually plowed back into domestic economy to actually build up infrastructure or investment into education. But that's not what the U.S. elite is interested in. They don't care about building a greater America. They don't care about making America great again. That's just a slogan. They care about lining their own pockets. They want to preserve their own top spot in the social ladder. That's the only thing they care about. They care about preserving the U.S. primacy. Why do they care about preserve U.S. primacy? Because they have set themselves up at the top of the food chain in the U.S. empire. That's what they care about. They don't care about average Joe from Joe Sixpack from Michigan. They don't care about that. For them, the rest of us are just peons for them to extract rent. Right? To use justifications like war spending to take more money from the rest of the population and put into their own pocket. This has been the case. This is why they locked up Julian Assange, because Julian Assange said the goal is not to win the Afghanistan war. The goal is to wash money from the vast tax bases of North America and in Europe into the pockets of a small transnational security elite. And that the problem with that is, okay, they can keep the grift going as long as they don't blunder into a big catastrophe that's like the one that's unfolding right now at the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, they are seriously screwing up the whole world economy, and this is going to be really, really bad, folks.
Everybody, please hit the like button and take the time to subscribe. Also, don't forget, I have to put this announcement out. Join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Time. Brian Berletic probably be on the show tomorrow if he can make it. But I want to go back to some, Carl. You said something very, very, very important that I believe went over a lot of people's head at the beginning of the show. When you talked about China putting bans on the export of fertilizer. This is in conjunction with, remember, Russia putting bans on the export of fertilizer. And as you said, this is the planting season, and now we see oil and gas prices through the roof. How is that going to affect, forget the Strait of Hormuz for a minute, how is that going to affect the pockets of everybody and the stomachs of everybody in America and around the world?
The price is going to go up, man. The price has already gone up, and it's going to go up a lot more because energy is a primary input to everything. Like it's not just the gas that fill up your car. It's also the fertilizers that you use to grow your food. Everything is energy dependent. And United States economy is actually, I just saw an article in New York Times. United States is actually 40% more oil intensive economy than China. It's more dependent on oil because the big oil controls everything. They are the big sponsors of both parties, and the big oil is going to make a lot of money with the oil price going up. So if you do work for the oil majors, well, you won the lottery. But if you don't, you're screwed. You're screwed because the price is going to go up. You're going to have to pay for the big oil profit for these oil majors. But even for the big oil companies, this is not ideal situation because they don't like big price fluctuations. They don't like huge spikes and volatility because that affects their investment decision. Because for a business to make a investment decision, they have to think long term. Like if I put this money up right now, will I be able to get this money back in 5-10 years time? And what Trump does is he create a whole bunch of uncertainty, a lot of volatility, and this is why a lot of the big business is very hesitating. Even the big oil companies are hesitating in putting upfront investment right now. This is what they said about Venezuela, by the way. They said they would rather invest in Canada because of the political uncertainties that's involved, and because business loves stability, and Trump is creating instability all around the world. First with the tariff war, and now with the whole energy crisis. I mean, this is going to be really bad, folks. I already said previously. Remember, the U.S. economy. If you're taking away all the investment into the AI bubble, the U.S. economy is already would already be in recession. The AI bubble is not sustainable anymore because AI is very energy intensive. That energy is not forthcoming. Two, I already said, even the making of semiconductor chips in Taiwan is depending on energy from the Middle East. So this is going to be bad all across the board. Everyone will feel the pain. Right now, there's still a time delay. From what happens at the Gulf to the supermarket, but when that that time delay, when it hits, it's going to be a tsunami. It's not going to be like a small trickle. It's going to be a flood. And it's going to be bad for not just Americans, by the way, all the consumers all around the world will have to face this very tough call, when they decide what to purchase in the coming years.
Yeah, I remember having Gregory Manarino, an investor, on the show. As a matter of fact, he'll be on the show in about a week or two. But he said that when this thing goes up and when the bond market explodes due to war or due to ineptitude by investors or government officials, that this will be more deadly than a nuclear exchange, because people will be hungry. There will be the kids will be starving. There will be shortages of food and we can see the makings of that right now with the embargo, China and Russia's embargo on America and everybody else, about the fertilizer and other things like that. But somebody, Flying Crocodile, one of the channel members and moderators, has a question for you, Carl. And Flying Crocodile, all the way from New Zealand, says, can Carl comment on India's action in sucking up to Israel and China's failure to more aggressively condemn the U.S. and Israel action and move to deter them? Will it collapse BRICS? I think China has been firm. I don't think Flying Crocodile saw the interview given by Victor Gao a few days ago, because he was asked specifically about a threat of a nuclear exchange, because a lot of people have been talking about Israel may go nuclear or the United States may go nuclear, and Victor Gao says that China would not allow that to happen. So I think that is as blunt as you can be about that. So, Carl, what do you say about this?
Okay, a couple of things. First, let's talk about India. I mean, India has really played a very bad hand in the recent diplomatic maneuvers. For the longest time, India maintains a non-alignment position in the world, which means they don't want to be sucked into any alliances. They will pursue their own independent foreign policy. This is why they have managed to maintain a friendly tie with Iran, Russia, and United States. But in the more recent years, the Modi government in India, they thought, okay, by sucking up to the U.S., it will get more favorable treatment from the U.S., maybe in terms of technological transfer, more industry supply chain, maybe relocating out of China into India. And they also understand correctly that Israel has a lot of influence in the U.S. politics. This plays a huge decision in their sucking up to Israel. Of course, ideologically, they're also more aligned with the Zionist government, because the Modi government is very anti-Muslim. You have to remember that they're very anti-Muslim. So this is another push for their political alignment with Israel and United States, and this has not paid well for them. First they got hit with a high tariff by Trump, and then Trump forced them to give up the Russian oil, which India very, very much depend. And then he went to Israel to hobnob with Netanyahu just right before the Iran war. After the Iran war, Modi was issuing statement of solidarity with all the Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, but said nothing about U.S.-Israel attack on Iran. And well, I mean, for one thing, I understand why they have to say they're in solidarity with the Gulf countries, because 8-9 million Indian nationals work in the Gulf countries. They send a lot of remittance back home. So Modi does not want to jeopardize that. I understand that, but he could at least make a statement condemning U.S. and Israel on killing of the Iranian top leadership. No, they didn't do any of that. And then what happened was Iran announced, well, Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed to anyone except Russian and Chinese. And they didn't say anything about Indians. And that's when the Indian leadership panicked. They realized, oh, crap, they're not getting more oil from the Gulf. That's when they scramble. They send a delegation to the Iranian embassy to offer condolences, and then they. Oh, and on top of that, India was actually complying with the U.S. sanction on Iranian oil by seizing 3 Iranian oil tankers. This, and so finally they went to Iran after a bunch of diplomatic maneuver. Iran allowed some Indian tankers to go through under the condition that India released those 3 Iranian oil tankers that they had seized previously. So it's a prisoner exchange program, really. But they really nuked their own relationship with Iran, which previously they had what they called strategic partnership. The Iran and India was supposed to work together in the Chabar port harbor, which was supposed to be a rival to the Chinese invested port in Gwadar in Pakistan. And just forget about that right now. And on top of that, India was invited an Iranian frigate to come to India for a naval fleet review. And as part of the protocol for the fleet review, it required the ship comes unarmed, without live ammunition. And U.S. was also at the same naval fleet review. And after the naval review, the war broke out. The U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. And as the Iranian frigate was leaving to head home, it got sunk off the water of Sri Lanka by U.S. subs. I mean, Indian government said nothing. They invited those Iranian ships who came because to honor the invitation. And then the Iranian ship gets taken out by U.S. in a sneak attack, and Indian government said nothing. I mean, this is blackest betrayal. So this is why they panicked after the Strait of Hormuz was closed. They went back to Washington to beg for permission to buy Russian oil again. This has led to the U.S. finally put a waiver on sanction on Russian oil because India they're not getting any oil from Middle East. They're not getting oil from Russia. India is even more oil dependent than some other countries. So before the war, India was buying Russian oil at $50 per barrel. They were getting a $10 discount per barrel compared to the market price, which was $60 per barrel back then. Now they have the honor to buy back Russian oil at over $100 per barrel, and there's the Indian discount is gone for them. Now they have to pay the market price. They have to pay the premium for the same Russian oil which they were just purchasing at half the price a few months ago. And this is all their own doing because they comply with the U.S. sanction. And guess what? India is a regional power. It's an inheritor of an ancient civilization. Why does it need permission from Washington to purchase Russian oil? This is a humiliation after humiliation. Anyway, but this India brought it to itself. This has been a disastrous Indian foreign policy for the past few years. Now I want to talk about this whole China thing. When Chinese,
hold on 1 second, Paul. I want to add something to you.
Go ahead.
I wanted to add something to what you said. Then you can finish up. Isn't it ironic that after the ship was sunk by the nuclear the submarine and India said nothing? Isn't it ironic that because India said nothing, right after that the United States lift all restrictions on India to purchase Russian oil? Was that a quid quo pro? What?
And also India, just before the war, they signed an agreement to allow U.S. military to station to have port of call in India. They allow U.S. Navy to dock on Indian ports. I mean, and this is
and rearm.
And given what happened when U.S. bases are being taken out by Iran in West Asia, and a lot of the U.S. Navy assets are now hiding in the Indian Ocean, you bet they're using that agreement, that they're gonna, and this is basically an act of aggression against Iran. Yeah, they have really backstabbed Iran in so many ways. This is this is gonna have some, they cause some irreparable damage. And again, they for what did they gain for it? They gained to buy Russian oil at double the price what they were paying before. They were paying $50 per barrel. Now they're going to pay $100 per barrel. That price is continuing to go up, by the way. The longer the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the higher that price is going to go. And this is the real consequences of India's foreign policy. They just play a really, really horribly. And okay, let's talk about I know the questions about BRICS, and also let's talk about China as well. Recently, China, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson was asked a specific question: was China providing material help to arm Iran against U.S. and Israel in this war? What the Chinese what's the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said specifically was, we stand with Iran on its defense of territorial integrity, of their defense of their homeland. And so let me translate from English to English in Chinese diplomatic speak. So the answer is yes. Yes, China is providing material help. Yes. But this is the difference between how China conduct diplomacy and people like Trump and Pete Hegseth. Because Trump and Pete Hegseth, they're really TV personalities. They're TV show hosts. Their instinct is to beat their chest in front of the camera and say, we're gonna do the terrible thing to us. We will do this and this and this. China prefer to speak softly, but to do everything behind the scenes. They're not gonna say, we're gonna flood Iran with so many materials. They're gonna make missiles out of the wazoo. So now China would never say that, but China will say, we support Iran in their fight against their territory, to preserve their territorial integrity. And they will continue to ship the material Iran will need to make missiles and drones. I mean, that is how China conducts its diplomacy. And another thing, right now, United States actually putting hold an active oil embargo against Cuba, which caused the Cuba's electric grid to fail couple of days ago. And what China and Iran and Russia are doing, they have an oil tanker sitting off the Caribbean ready to ship to Cuba. China has donated a lot of solar panels that had really been able to provide an emergency stopgap to provide power to the Cuban people. So right now the Cuban electricity grid is back on because they're doing a lot of the emergency install of the solar panels that got shipped from China right now. China is also shipped tons of rice to Cuba, a month supply of rice to Cuba. So while U.S. is trying to starve out Cuba, China and Russia are helping. So I think, the BRICS is fine. BRICS is well, the I in the BRICS is getting wobbly. The I is always the weakest link in the BRICS anyway. But the I can be replaced with either Iran or Indonesia, right? I mean, but China and Russia, they're doing their parts. They're just not like Pete Hegseth and Trump. They're beating their chest and openly threatening people. But they are helping. Yes.
So, Carl, what do you think? Do you think Russia now becomes more suspicious of India because of these moves? And do you think now Chabahar will be offered to the Chinese?
Yeah, I don't think that Chabahar will ever get off the ground, but given that India had all these years to commit the investment to actually build it. I mean, like, it's like look at the India's indigenous fifth generation fighter program, right? I mean, like, it's gonna they have been talking about it for years, for 20 years, and then nothing gets done. And I think that's going to be, unfortunately, what happened to the Chabahar port project. India will try to keep talking about it to keep alive, until Iranian finally gets sick and tired of them, and then offer it to the Chinese at some point. I don't know when it's going to happen, but this is not gonna the Chabahar project is not gonna kicked off by India anytime soon, especially given the present circumstances. And the problem is India, they have a political culture that's very similar to the United States. Their leaders like make big boasts. They also like make very big claims. India superpower 2020. Well, now it's India superpower 2030. Anyway, so I don't think nothing. I don't expect anything to come out of the Chabahar project anytime soon. As for Russia, I think Russia they're fine with the way it is, because now they get to sell their oil at a premium to India. The U.S. war on Iran has single-handedly saved the Russian government budget. I mean, they just went from a budget shortfall suddenly to a budget surplus in a matter of a month. So Russian is setting pretty. They're happy to continue to sell oil to India at market price now. Before India get a friendship discount, but now they get to buy at the market price. So Russia is happy with that arrangement, and India is the one that's going to continue to pay the price. For, I mean, it's really the ordinary Indians paying the price for the foolishness of their leadership. They're very inept and incompetent leadership. I mean, Modi gives Trump a run for his money in terms of economic mismanagement. But yeah.
Well, Carl, do you think now, looking at everything retrospectively, because of the Ukrainian war and because of the war on Iran, I remember when Russia and India were ironclad allies, but India's betrayal on multiple occasions, especially when it stopped buying Russian oil the way it was, exposed India to Russia, and China has been a bulwark to help keep the West from suffocating Russia's economy. Do you think that the Russians are now skeptical of that so-called ironclad friendship with Modi in India, and are positioning themselves to a more reliable friendship with the Chinese?
Well, I mean, the Russian Chinese relationship was never in jeopardy. The Washington has been talking about reverse Kissingering, pulling Russia on our side against China. That was never going to happen. That was a lot of wishful thinking. And as for India and Russia relationship, well, that relationship goes deeper. It really goes back to their traditional relationship between Soviet Union and India. And so Russia has long been a very India-phile country. They have fond memories of India. So I think that likely will continue. I mean, and again, in the end, the deal worked out for Russians. They're now selling oil at twice the price to the Indians. So in that regard, I mean, India will continue to be a large market for Russia in terms of energy and also in terms of weapon system, because India, they just couldn't get their domestic defense industry in order. So they continually depend on foreign procurement for a lot of their defense needs. They have been buying all over the place. Recently, they're leaning towards the Europeans and the Americans, but they'll be back. They will be back buying more hardware from Russia. So I think Russia will be happily supply India with weapons, with energy needs, and but you will be more transactional, a transactional friendship, like a commercial interest. So, I mean, Russia has done try for the longest. Before the BRICS, there was a RIC, was Russia, India, China, was by the Putin's predecessors, the Russian Prime Minister Primakov. He tried to stitch that together, but that didn't really pan out because the hostility India had toward China. India was okay to work with Russia, but they didn't like China. But on this front, even India has changed their stance. They have recently lifted the ban on Chinese investment because they realized they need it. And they actually went to China to ask for shipment of urea, which again is a type of fertilizer, because they are desperate.
And
they're desperate. Yes, they asked China to lift their ban on rare earth and urea, and in return they started to relax some of the restriction on Chinese investment into India because they finally realized, the Americans are not coming through with their promises. They're gonna have to, to moderate their hostile toward China somewhat. So I think over long term, China and Russia will they hold the card, so they will be sitting pretty. It's the Indian government that have to make the change. They have to recalibrate and rethink their own alignment in this fast changing world.
You're talking about Yevgeny Primakov, who was the prime minister. He was the one who formed the RICS. But do you think that India has taken note that the American leadership said they will not allow India to rise, like they made the mistake on China, and yet they're still kowtowing to the very nations that is openly stating that they're going to sabotage his rise?
And this man, I think he was like a deputy secretary or something. He was giving a lecture to an audience full of Indians in India. He was telling, we will not allow you to rise the same way, China has risen. Everybody who's observer of U.S. policy knew that was the truth. John Mearsheimer also said the same thing. He has warned the Indian TV show host back few years ago. Said, United States will also play a balancing game against India if India becomes as powerful and prosperous as China is today. And now they heard it straight from the horse's mouth. A U.S. government official is saying that, yes, that's confirmed. That's a U.S. official policy. They will not allow India to rise. So I think Indian leadership have some very hard, serious thinking to do. Some hard soul searching, and they gonna have to make some decisions. They have to make some decisions on how they want to redirect this giant ship that India is. It's the world's largest country in terms of population. I think they will have to come to the realization that if they are serious about developing their economy, industrialize India, they're going to need China's help. They're going to need China's investment. They're going to need China's technology. And that's a realization a lot of the global South countries have already made. U.S. is not in competition with China. It's not in competition with China. The only competition U.S. can talk about is security competition. U.S. is not in competition with China in terms of providing infrastructure and investment in global South. Not even close. China is the largest provider of those things. If India want to really develop and take off, they're gonna have to find a way to work with China.
Now, closing, Carl. We've talked about Iran. We've talked about Russia. We've talked about Ukraine a little bit. Do you think that one of the reasons that India is so, I would say, so hesitant on dealing with China on a equal footing is because they don't want to finally uh, close out the border issue, because China has closed out the border issue with every nation surrounding it except for India, and India refuses to negotiate what would be acceptable terms, and they have been using the United States as a counterbalance. Do you think that is one of the main reasons
Yeah.
why they have been acting the way they have?
Well, for one thing, the Indian government have been telling their own population for years, for decades, that China is aggressor. China is squatting our land. So now, if they suddenly say, "Oh, we actually those are Chinese land," we're rejoining the border, it's going to be immensely politically unpopular. So there's no political leader in India, I think, have the that kind of political will to settle the border. And on the other issue, there's an incentive issue for the Indian military. The existence of border issue is very convenient for them to continually depend on budget increase. It's like, we're fighting this big bad China. We need more investment in our border post. We need more investment in different equipments we need to fight China. So, yeah, unfortunately, the border issue it's just not going to go away, and this is the biggest thorn on the side of Indian-Chinese bilateral relation. I mean, China has shown willingness to settle its border issue with every other country, because the other countries are also willing to settle their border issue. The really holdout is the Indian government, because there's no political will to finally man up and say, okay, sorry guys, we actually had this silly inherited this colonial legacy from the British that we are going to finally set right, cast aside the historical burden. No. Instead, for the last 50, 60 years, they have been telling the Indian population, China is squatting our land, we have to throw the Chinese out. And how do you make 180 term from that? You can't. And then, so I'm not optimistic on settlement of the border issue anytime soon, which means the Chinese-Indian relationship is always going to be testy, which is very unfortunate, because really there's not much real reason for these two countries to have a hostile relationship. High fence make good neighbors. They have the highest fence, the whole Himalayan range in between them. But India decide to make an issue against some rocks that they claim they're theirs.
I was listening before we close out. I was listening to, and I listen to this guy a lot. He's a former high general in the Indian Armed Forces, and he was talking about how India came almost panic when the war with Pakistan broke out, when they used some of China's weapons, and they were so advanced that they nullified everything that the Indians did, and how they're trying to bury that story. And he said, it comes to the real, they're starting to come to the realization that China is decades ahead of not only India, but some aspects of America and certain military technologies. And this may be the lever that will force the Indian establishment to finally come to the table and settle the border dispute, because if they don't do it, if China really wants to, they could just take it. But China wants to be fair, and they don't want to dust up the border. They want to be neighbors with them. So this was an Indian general actually saying this. What do you say about that?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, China has no motive to create the border tension with India. For decades, China is trying to improve its relationship with India to increase the bilateral trade relationship. And India is the side that has been wary of getting closer to China, because they think it's going to be a Chinese takeover of their economy. This is why they India was the first country to ban TikTok, by the way. They did it before United States. They're the first one to ban TikTok. And they were banning Chinese investment into the Indian startup scene. You know, the Indian tech startup were getting a lot of their capital from big Chinese companies like Tencent, Baidu, ByteDance, etc. But then the problem is that all these new Indian tech startup threaten the monopoly on the Indian economy by the Ambani and the Adani family. Those are the backers, the financial backer of Modi. And so these Indian oligarchs, they want to maintain their monopoly in India so they can continue to collect rent from everyday Indians. And they have their man in the government, Modi, that will do their bidding. This is why, there's some let's just say there's some structural problems between the India-China relationship. And those structural problems mostly present in India. And so this is why I'm not overly optimistic.
Well, my guy, thank you again, Carl, for joining me on the platform, man. I know you got father duty right now, so I'm going to let you go handle yours, and I'm going to handle mine. Be blessed, man. I'll contact you later. Be safe. All right. Thank you,
Rashid.
All right. Be
my
blessed.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Right. Everybody, listen. Join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Time. We're supposed to have Brian Berletic from the New Atlas on the platform. Hopefully he'll be able to join. If something comes up, we'll still rock and roll. You know how we do things. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth on God's green earth. I want to say to you all, do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had or because there's some accolades to be had, but do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember that God Almighty is watching you. Hit that like button and subscribe. And as my mother, my beautiful late and great mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the divine supreme being of freedom, justice, and equality has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that's going to get you through this. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody. We're out of here. Peace.